So I haven't posted in a few days, and I just want to start by saying I'm sorry. I didn't mean to disappear on you guys like that, and there were two reasons that I did. The first was it was winter, and so I wasn't able to get outside and practice on the track because it was just way too cold to get any kind of good quality training in. So I was doing a lot of pretty repetitive workouts in the gym, doing some explosive lifting and jumping and stuff that I'll show you in a minute. So I didn't want to just keep posting essentially the same video every single week for months on end. And secondly, and more importantly, I got a job. I got a full-time coaching job at Tryon University as the assistant track and cross-country coach. And so that has been an awesome experience and a wild journey for me. I moved states and it's taken quite a bit of getting used to and settling into the flow of things. But now I'm coming back with videos again, and I'm super excited to show you guys what I've been up to. Tryon University has an indoor track, and so I can actually train here all year round without having to worry about the weather, which is going to be a serious game changer for me moving forward. And I've also learned a ton about my body and how I respond to training over the last year. Unfortunately, I have lost quite a bit of fitness from when I was doing consistent sprinting all through the year and into December. I had just hit some acceleration PRs from doing weeks of resisted sprint training, and also hit a 30-meter fly PR of 3.007, which was a really big deal for me. I almost cracked the 3-second barrier, which has been a goal of mine for a very long time. So after having all that success, then I got cold and I had to stop training outside like I mentioned, and I have lost quite a bit since then. You guys will see as I get into the training portion of the video that I lost some speed, I lost some strength, and overall just sort of had to restart from scratch, at least in terms of sprinting itself. But I haven't given up on hope for this season. I'm hoping to be able to put together a couple races around the end of April and early May, just to see where I am, reevaluate, and then go into training for the next year with a lot more knowledge and experience to build off of. I'm hoping to do quite a bit more informational videos moving forward, so if there's anything specific you guys want to know about my training or about how you could structure your own training, let me know in the comments. And if you guys want help with your own training, I'm going to start coaching people one-on-one, so you can find a link to that in the description. With all that being said, welcome to the return of the Sub 48 project. During January and February, I was doing a lot of strength training and things like jumps and plyometrics, especially ankle dominant plyometrics. During this time, I actually received my E-node sensor in the mail, which is a bar velocity tracker, and so I started experimenting with that a ton, seeing how different lifts have different time to peak velocities and different power levels, and just experimenting to see what could get me the best stimulus that was the most specific to the different aspects of sprinting I was trying to work on. Earlier on, I was targeting things like early acceleration and middle acceleration, so these would be things with slightly longer times to peak velocity or speeds of acceleration of the bar, and I really enjoyed that style of training. During this time, I was also working on my vertical jump, just pretty much for fun, and also because having a good vertical jump, in my opinion, pretty strongly correlates with early acceleration. One of the things I was working toward during this time was a standing 30-inch vertical jump. I didn't measure this using a Vertec or any kind of jump mat, but I measured it by trying to jump and land on a 30-inch box with straight legs. So obviously if you do a normal box jump and you pull up your legs, it's not a true indication of how high you're jumping, but if you land with straight legs and an entirely straight body, then you obviously have to have jumped the actual height of the box, or in reality actually a little bit higher than the height of the box, and so that is something I was working on throughout this time period. You'll notice I did a lot of reactive stuff where I would drop off of boxes and bounce off the ground, so basically different forms of drop jumps, both for height and for distance. And all of this was just trying to get in a plyometric stimulus, sort of like sprinting, with maybe sort of similar ground reaction times and forces to sprinting, even though I couldn't actually get outside and sprint. I also experimented with how using different machines led to different time to peak velocities and power levels as compared to using a barbell. For example, I could use quite a bit more weight and generate quite a bit more power using this leg press machine as compared to using a barbell back squat. I could also complete the reps faster, which would mean higher bar velocities and eccentric velocities, which makes it more specific to sprinting and a higher stimulus. It was also right around this time that I started getting a 30-inch standing vertical. I also did some more traditional plyometrics, such as single leg bounding, alternate leg bounding, and things like that. I'm not super great at single leg bounding, and that's something that next year I'm going to build on a lot. I want to do a lot more plyometrics, especially as someone who's relatively untrained in sprinting. I think I could gain a lot through plyometrics, and it's mainly an unexplored area for me. And so it's definitely something I'm going to look at more in the future. Something that I find interesting is I seem to handle things like drop jumps, especially ankle dominant drop jumps, pretty well in terms of a tissue health perspective, which is weird because when I do sprinting, I tend to have a lot of Achilles tendon issues, but then I can do drops off of a 30-inch box into a jump and it tends not to hurt my tendons. So I really don't know the cause for that. And what's extra weird is I went from all this type of training where I was doing a lot of ankle dominant stuff into sprinting at the indoor track at Trine University. And the very first week I came back to sprinting, I developed Achilles tendonitis or tendinopathy straight out the gate. Now, I did take about a week off before this happened, and that's my best guess for what caused it. I don't tend to do particularly well when I take any time off, and there is some research to support that. I believe after 2 or 3 days of not stimulating a tendon, it starts degrading. And so for somebody with recurring tendon issues, I really need to be more careful about giving myself a stimulus even during times that I'm not consistently training. A few minutes a day of extensive plyometrics might have been enough to keep that from happening. I also did a fair number of pogo jumps, some weighted and some unweighted, which are very intense on the Achilles, which again is interesting because I could handle those no problem, and then after only a week off, my Achilles problem started to come back. But it is what it is. Now, there was one day during this time period of doing a lot of lifting and a lot of plyometrics that I actually got to go outside and train because the weather was warm enough, and it was one of the best sprint days I've ever had. I didn't time any of my reps, but it felt like in the middle to late end of my acceleration, I was running faster than I've ever run at top speed. Now, obviously I didn't time it, so there's no guarantees, but I was feeling really confident that I was in a good spot physically. And then again, I ended up taking that 1 week off while I was trying to move from Ohio to Indiana to work at Trine University. And somehow during that time, it felt like I lost everything I had gained from all the months of strength training and plyometrics. This was my first day on Trine's indoor track. It felt awesome being back to sprinting again, but like I mentioned, pretty much right out the gate, I started having Achilles tendon pain, which was extremely frustrating, but you know, you gotta work with what you got. And I started figuring it out and doing some rehab stuff, and also being as careful as I could with load management, only pushing myself on days where it felt good and taking it easy on days where it didn't. And that's really all you can do. This was my first day in one of our weight rooms on campus, and I was doing some stuff measuring time to peak velocity, but I only got in about 1 or 2 good sets before the football team came in and kicked me out. This was my next time back sprinting, and you can see me being pretty tentative on these accelerations because I was trying to make sure I wasn't going to have too much pain in my Achilles, and then I got right into the reps. This day I had an intensive tempo workout at around 80 to 85% effort, where I had a 300, a 200, and a 100. The 300 I ended up clocking in at about 41.32. The 200 I ended up clocking in at about 26 seconds, and the 100 I ended up running about a 12.8. I was worried from all the time I had taken off that even though my top speed might have been okay, which by the way it wasn't, as you'll see in a few minutes here, but even though my top speed might have been okay, I was definitely out of 400-meter shape because I hadn't done any long training for the majority of the time that I was inside. So intensive tempo or work at around 80 to 85% I thought was a great way to bridge the gap between doing just speed work and doing long, hard intervals such as 200 or 300 meters at faster speeds. I also spent quite a lot of time working on my blocks. Part of this was because I can do early acceleration without having too much pain in my Achilles, and so that's something I focused on quite a bit. And also because I hadn't touched blocks in a very long time, and so I wanted to get familiar with how they felt and get myself to a spot that I could compete out of blocks if I wanted to. When I was first getting back into it, I struggled a lot with getting hip extension out of the blocks. One of the ways people sometimes describe this is getting your hips to buy in, and I was struggling quite a bit with getting that to happen. This was my first time doing 10-meter flies since I started training again, and it did not go well at all. The fastest speed I hit was 1.037, which is absolutely atrocious. For reference, my all-time PR is 0.992, and the 30-meter fly PR that I was talking about right before I had to stop training outside had an average 10-meter time of 1.002. So as you can see, I was not even close to my best. I tried giving myself slightly longer acceleration zones, and it didn't really make a difference. My body just was not used to outputting high-intensity sprints. Part of the issue also could have been the Achilles tendon pain I was experiencing. If my body didn't feel comfortable using its tissues to their fullest degree, it would make sense that it would be holding me back a little bit in my training. And for whatever reason, I just did not feel good for honestly quite a few weeks after I came to Trine. I came back a couple days later, and after doing some practice accelerations around the curve of the indoor track, I ran basically an all-out 300. I called it more like 93 to 95%, but it's fair enough to call it an all-out 300. It was my first time running this far in a long time, and it definitely did not feel good. I got about 100 meters in and started feeling tired, and obviously that was only about a third of the way through. It's always a humbling learning experience when you haven't done really fast work over long distances in a long time. And I ended up running 37.28, which is not great. As you guys might remember, over the summer, I was running times in the 36s. And this much later in the year, it would be nice to see times that are faster than that. But all things considered, I can't be too unhappy about it. I just obviously wish things went a little bit differently throughout the year. After a 16-minute rest, I went into an intensive tempo 400. So this should be around 80 to 85%, which for me ideally would be somewhere between 56.5 and 60 seconds. The first lap felt pretty smooth. It was nice to run at a slower pace than the all-out 300 I had just run. But as I started entering into the second lap, the burning started setting in. To get myself through it, I was just thinking about being out of shape and how I wanted to be able to perform as well as I could this year. And that is my motivation in a lot of the workouts that you'll see coming up. I ended up with a final time of about 59.3 seconds, which I was pretty happy with. But this workout really took a lot out of me. I laid on the floor for a while afterward, just completely dead, which is understandable because I haven't done much of that type of work anytime recently. I came out a couple days later for a block session, but I was very fatigued going into this from the workout I was just talking about. So none of the positions I was hitting were super great. I wasn't getting great block clearance, and altogether it just was not very pretty. But at least I got to get a little more comfortable in my block position and got to do some more experimentation and prove that I can at least get through a block start even if I'm really tired. I came in the next week and started out the session with some plyometrics with the intention of getting myself kind of fired up, ready to go, and ready to produce high levels of force outputs. I did some regular bounding, some straight-legged bounding, and some pogo hops. I would call these intensive pogo hops, so they were high effort as opposed to lower effort ones. Then I got into the speed portion of my workout, which was 20-meter flies. And I actually decided not to time these because I didn't want to feel the pressure of not running good times and trying to run good times. I just kind of wanted to let my body do what it wanted to do and get through the reps without worrying about improving on my previous times. This was one of the first days that I actually felt kind of fast again. If I had timed it, I probably would have seen I wasn't that fast, but it felt better. And so it seemed like a step in the right direction. And after I finished the 20-meter flies, I went into a 250 fast. So I would call that 95+% effort. I had the problem again where I got about 100 to 150 meters in and started feeling tired. But I just pushed through it because I know I was fatigued and I needed this to get better, and I ended with a time of about 30.82 seconds. After that, I had a 30-second rest, and then I had a roll-in 60, then walk-back recovery into 2 roll-in 40s. I really like these because you have to force yourself to run fast after you're really fatigued, and so calling on a lot of motor unit recruitment while you're already super tired is pretty specific, in my opinion, to the end of an actual 400. And doing those also has the advantage of kind of flushing out your legs a little bit. Even though it's a high-intensity thing, I generally feel better after I do it, so I enjoy adding those in quite a bit. A few days later, I went out for some med ball throws at progressively different weights. So I started with a 30-pound ball, worked down to a 20, then a 10, and I believe my lightest throws were on a 6-pound ball. I initially wanted to do some lifting, but I think there was a team in the weight room when I tried to go, and so I decided to do med ball throws instead as just sort of recovery day and sort of lifting day. After that, I went into my hardest intensive tempo session of the year. So again, intensive tempo is between 80 and 85%, and I started this workout with a 600. 600 meters is the furthest I've run in probably a year and a half or longer. There could definitely be something I'm forgetting, but I have not run over 300 meters in training or 360 meters on a hill in a very long time. So this felt pretty foreign to me, and I was very nervous going into it. My goal for the 600 was to end up between a minute 35 and a minute 40 seconds, which means I was trying to average somewhere between 32 and 34 seconds per 200, and it definitely felt strange compared to the work that I've been doing recently. The first lap, as you would expect, was no big deal, but going through the second, some burning started to set in. But as I got into the third lap, I realized I wanted to make sure I ran a good time so that it was worth it. And so I started winding things up to try to give it a little bit of a kick to make sure I got a decent time. I ended with a minute and 38.66 seconds, so I was pretty happy with that. And after a little bit of a rest, probably 6 to 8 minutes, I did a 400. 400 was at the same intensity level, but obviously it needed to be a little faster because it's relatively easier than running a 600. So the time goal was between 56.5 and 60 seconds. I once again got through the first lap pretty much okay, but I was really struggling through the second lap. However, I made it through, of course, and I ended up running 61.78 seconds. So I was a little bit slow on that one, about 2 seconds, which isn't the end of the world. It was a tough workout and I'm not used to doing that sort of stuff. And then after about a 5 to 6 minute rest, I went into a 200. My goal for the 200 was to be between 26 and 27.5 seconds, and I ended up running 27.79 seconds. So slightly slow on that one, but overall I was pretty happy with it. And I handled the session a lot better than I was expecting to, since I haven't done that sort of work in such a long time. I actually felt better after that workout than I did after the 300 followed up by the 400 that I did earlier, which goes to show you how different things can feel when they're run at different intensities. And it also goes to show you why intensive tempo work isn't necessarily all that specific to the 400. I think, like I mentioned earlier, it's a great way to segue between just doing speed work into doing speed endurance and then special endurance work, but it alone is not enough to get you fit for the 400. You're gonna eventually have to do some longer reps at higher intensity efforts, probably between 250 and 350 meters, to make sure you're actually prepared to run the 400. That Friday, I went in for another block start session, which I had written down as 2 by 10 meters, 2 by 20 meters, and then 2 by 30 meters, but I pretty much ended up just winging it and running whatever distance felt good. This session, I spent quite a bit of time working on my block placement and body positioning in the blocks, because I noticed watching some of my older block starts that my front leg was at about a 90-degree angle, and I'm probably not strong enough right now to have a really good start from a 90-degree angle. And so I was working on getting my positioning right so that I could be slightly wider or have a slightly more open leg than 90 degrees, because of course you're significantly stronger at wider knee angles. If my explanation didn't make sense, just think about doing a full squat and then doing a quarter squat. Obviously you're way stronger in a quarter squat, and the same goes for your block positioning. I was still having some issues getting full extension or hip buy-in through my block starts, and so I started thinking about vertical jumps. When I do a regular jump or a counter movement jump, I have no issue reaching full extension and getting my hips bought in because my body feels safe and I'm just going straight upward. So I started trying to translate that feeling into my starts and tried to actually jump out of the blocks. And in doing so, I had a much easier time getting buy-in of my hips and more full extension out of the block start. And so that cue seemed like it worked really well for me to get a fast, explosive start. The following Monday, I came out for some 30-meter flies and then a 300. I actually went ahead and timed the 30-meter flies this time, which was pretty disappointing, but I knew that I wasn't super fit and I've put on quite a bit of fatigue as I've been training through these cycles. So while it hurts to see the slower times, I'm trying not to beat myself up over it too much. When it came time for the 300, I actually timed it with my timing system. If you guys don't know, I use the app Photo Finish automatic timing to time all of my reps. It works great for timing flies and for timing regular runs because you can use the touch start feature where when you release your thumb from the starter phone, it starts the clock. And when you pass through the camera of the ending phone, it stops the clock. And so it's a great way to time things like short accelerations and even things like longer reps like this 300. The team at Photo Finish is absolutely awesome and I cannot recommend the app enough. And that does it for the return of the Sub 48 project. Again, I want to say I'm so sorry for disappearing for such a long time, but I'm intending to be back for good now. And with that being said, I could really use your guys' ideas for what sort of videos to make moving forward. So please, if you have any questions about training or things you want to hear about or learn about, definitely leave them in the comments, and that'll give me a lot of great ideas to work with moving forward. And I'm going to be training super consistently now that I have an indoor facility. So I'm going to be grinding. I hope you guys are grinding. And if you want me to coach you, go to the link in the description. I'd be super happy to help you out with your training. Thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.